Fast fact. According to Salesforce research, 80% of customers say the experience a company provides is as important as its product or services. I'm Drew Thomas, and you're listening to Bank Chats. All right, so we're talking about customer service.
By the time this is airing, we're just getting out of Financial Wellness Month, which was January. And so the best place to start for financial wellness is the people that you talk to every day about your finances, your bank tellers, your what we call RSSAs. And the person who trains all of our RSSAs is with us.
Yeah.
That's me.
Yeah. Yeah. So we have Amie Stevens with us, and she is what is your title, actually?
Retail Training Director.
Retail Training Director.
Yes.
Okay.
So I'm the trainer for all of the retail staff.
Okay. Now, for people that are not in banking, what is the difference between retail staff and
The rest of the bank?
Yeah, right.
All of our branch staff. So that's all of your base, the tellers that you would come in and see, the managers. And then our retail staff is kind of the back offices, making sure all the branches are running okay.
So like support staff?
Support staff, yeah.
Handling all the problems and the issues?
Yeah, that's the day-to-day a lot of times. Is
Okay.
problem solving and helping out with what's going on out in the branches.
Okay. But you primarily focus on training the people that the customers that walk in see
Absolutely.
every day.
Yeah, the RSSAs, the Retail Sales and Service Associates.
Okay.
That's a mouthful,
It is.
That is.
but it sounds really good.
The generic term would be Universal Teller,
Okay.
but we switched from a basic teller to a Retail Sales and Service Associate.
Okay.
So I was just about to say, so most banks would call what we call an RSSA they
Just
call a teller.
A teller.
Right. So
Right.
that's traditionally what most people, I think, would think of as when they walk into their branch, they see a teller or a manager.
So
Mhm.
do our RSSAs do something that a traditional teller does not do?
So tellers used to be more just transactional. And then if you needed like a new account open, you would have to go see a platform teller, which had more enhancements where you could open new accounts and kind of guide our customers into the right products.
Okay.
Whereas now all of our tellers are doing transactions, opening up new accounts, taking loan applications. So ideally, you should just be able to see the same person to do everything.
No, one size fits all.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think there's a definite move that direction with banking.
Mhm.
I think, from some of the stuff that I've read, you see that customers really want that experience where when they walk in, they want to talk to one person. They don't want to have to be handed off to like 7 different people
Absolutely.
every time that they come in, and they want I want to talk to somebody about a loan. I got to talk to somebody else. Now, is that?
Yeah, that's exactly what we were going for. I mean, I think, jumping around from, I made my deposit. Now we're going to send you back to this person to open up a new account and send you to this person to do a loan. It's just easier and more personable if you can walk in and see Jeff every time,
Yeah.
see that same person, become name-to-name basis with all of your customers. And then, the next time something changes in their lives, that's who they call.
Very cool. So let's go down the line with some questions.
Okay.
Okay. So when you're hiring an RSSA, what are you looking for? Is there a specific personality or work ethic? Can you tell right off the bat when you're training someone if they're going to be a good fit or not?
Well, a good RSSA, I think, is personable and approachable. We want someone that our customers feel comfortable talking to about, themselves and, of course, their financials. So our customers, want those tellers to the RSSAs to be someone that they could call up on the phone and say, hey, what's going on? And kind of just be themselves with.
Sure.
So obviously, you don't have to always interact with the same teller every time you walk into the
Right.
bank. If somebody's off, they're on vacation, they're with with another customer or whatever. But is it fair to say that it's more of a personal banking experience? Because if I come in, I always look for Amie, and so Amie kind of knows me, and we sort of develop a shorthand between what I want to do and what my accounts are like.
Exactly. When I was a teller, I remember knowing certain customers by their names, exactly what they would do every month and every time, and the convenience of the customer knowing that I knew how to take care of them and what they wanted to do was just, it made the process a lot more smoother.
It's a time saver.
It was a time saver. It was more personable. But then again, they could walk in and see anybody else and get the same exact experience, hopefully.
So it's like a McDonald's French fry. Like you just you get the same, no matter which McDonald's you go to, you get the same.
Should, yeah.
Yeah. So, so what's your core philosophy when it comes to customer service, and how do you sort of instill that in the team that you have?
So customer service comes down to getting to know your customers and what their needs are, asking them open-ended questions to kind of get them to open up to you. And then that way you can give them suggestions based on who they are and what their needs are. In training, we go through a series of profiling questions where we kind of ask them a bunch of different questions to see where they are in life and what stages in life they are, and then guide them to the products that would best be fitting to them.
Okay. When you're looking for new employees or you're training current employees, are there any skills that you prioritize over another skill? Is patience more important than, a different skill?
Overall, I would say patience, being able to put on a happy face, being able to remain calm when things get a little bit chaotic. I think those are good qualities to have. When I start training somebody new, if they are comfortable just talking to me whenever we first meet, that's a good sign.
Okay.
Because you should be able to talk to anybody if you're on the front line at the teller line,
Sure.
So just being able to make easy conversation is a great skill to have. And of course, being able to count money.
That would be it. So do you look for people who have had customer service experience in the past?
Yeah, that is probably number one when the managers are looking at resumes. Did they do anything with customer facing before, and have they handled money before? I would say those are the two things that we want to be looking for in general.
Okay. I mean, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, regardless of what you're doing, I think working with customers, if you're working in retail, if you're working as a waiter or waitress, something like that, I think that you could argue there's a lot of crossover between that kind of customer service and what you would get in a bank or whenever you're trying to do, because there's got to be some difficult conversations at times.
So it's funny you mentioned McDonald's, and it transferring over. We always say, what's the best fast food customer service is, of course, Chick-fil-A, right?
No, McDonald's.
No, McDonald's?
Yeah, I worked at McDonald's, so I'm going to stick with
you're
McDonald's.
Gonna stick with McDonald's. But Chick-fil-A, they do a training process for customer service. So I try to say we want to be the Chick-fil-A of banks,
Yeah. I can understand that. I mean, I don't know that I've ever had a poor experience at a Chick-fil-A.
Yeah, I mean, I may not love them as
think
my
I have.
favorite food, but do I always feel like I was welcomed and excited, by the
Sometimes
employees?
I think sometimes it's the lingo. They don't use "you're welcome." It's always my pleasure. And I, even though it's sort of trained into them to say that, I think the fact that they're using different words than what you normally hear on a daily basis, it makes it sound more.
I think it's just how they conduct business. You ever gone through a drive-through and they pop up at your window with a tablet?
That's
and
right.
yeah,
They do.
Yeah, it just throws me off.
Yeah. Well, I've been to Chick-fil-A's where they actually have this. They've extended the canopy, and now they have these people just milling around outside.
Yeah, that's
and
common in the
taking orders
South.
and things like that. Is it really?
Mhm.
So I just came from Texas, and the coffee shops down there, they come up to your window, at the car rather than inside the building. So that's unfortunately for Pennsylvanians, if we're doing that model,
It's like
very
a car
cold
lot.
right now.
Yeah. Well, it's Sonic is kind of like that.
Yeah.
Sonic
Yeah.
has that sort of side, but you can pull into a stall, but that kind of has that 50s car hop
50s,
feel
They need roller skates.
to it. Yeah, they do need roller skates. Absolutely. Go ahead, Jeff.
Okay. So how do you balance customer satisfaction with business needs? So you can't always please every customer.
Right.
What is that line?
Well, customer satisfaction is always a priority. However, we have to remember that the bank is a business. So it's a balancing act. We're trying to do what's best for our customers, treat all customers the same with equalness and fairness. However, we have to meet the needs of the bank as well.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. I mean,
Yeah.
we kind of just did a 2 cents we talked about credit unions versus banks.
Right.
And I mean, banks are for profit, right? So that doesn't necessarily, like we said in that episode, that doesn't necessarily make them bad or good compared to a credit union,
Right.
Which is they're not even really not for profit. They're just, I don't know what, they're different. Yeah. If you want to know the difference, go back and listen to that episode. But
there's going to be a line between where a customer is successful and where the bank's successful as well. And finding that
yeah,
middle ground is what we got to do.
Yeah. And I think sometimes too, we tend to think that everything being equal is treating every customer the same. But sometimes customers, I correct me if I'm wrong, but I would have to assume that some customers need more hand-holding than others.
Absolutely.
So treating them all exactly the same maybe is a little...
Yeah, maybe not so much saying it that way, but giving every customer exactly what they need from us as tellers. That would be probably the better way to say it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So in today's world with everything going online and mobile banking and PCs and all that kind of stuff, what do you think the technology impact has been on customer service? Do you think it's gotten better or worse with technology?
It could be better or worse depending on the customer, I think. But I think technology can have a big impact on the customer service. How quickly and efficiently our technology works will affect how the customer's overall experience is. So we're looking forward to some new technology updates here at AmeriServ. And I think that will make the experience for both our tellers and the customers more satisfied because it's going to speed things up.
Yeah.
So technology, I think, is helping a lot of customers with like online banking and the convenience factors. And then there's, different generations that maybe that makes things a little bit more difficult. But that's why we still have the brick and mortar buildings where they can come in and visit us. Do
you think that I agree with you about the elderly sort of population, like anybody over the age of probably at this point maybe 60, is probably more likely to want to do stuff. But I would have to think that even younger people, if it's more complicated of a transaction, they probably want to do it more in person than they do online. But I could be wrong. I don't know.
I think that is a good general blanket statement. But I think so. I had this conversation with my brother actually.
Oh,
because he banks with Navy Federal, and I was like, "Hey Ryan, there's a Navy Federal branch in San Antonio where you live now." He's like, "I'll never have to visit it." I said, "Well, why not? Just go in and talk to them, see what's going on." And he said, I'm going to be one of those very rare customers that I can do everything online. I would rather do it online. I don't want to see people in person.
Yeah.
So I think that there are going to be some people in that really heavy technology centered mindset where they would rather just not talk to people. But there are also going to be people that, like you said, if it's more difficult than just making a deposit or taking cash out of the ATM, they're probably going to come in and ask some questions.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm kind of like a middle ground.
I'm a middle ground.
I love technology. I love being able to do online banking, but I love knowing that I have someone that I can come to if I run into a problem or I don't know how to do something.
Yeah.
I can come into a brick and mortar store.
Yeah, I'm definitely a mix as well. I do a little bit of in-person stuff for my business on the side of working here, and I, also just like to be able to access things online and have apps and things like that.
I think too, there's a certain cost involved from the bank side on technology that a lot of people don't fully appreciate. Like, I think most banks, most credit unions can do your basic deposits, move money from one account to another, that kind of stuff online. Maybe make a mobile check deposit, that sort of thing on the app. But doing stuff like opening a loan, opening even an account, and doing all that kind of stuff online, some banks are much better at that than others. And I think traditionally you're going to find probably the bigger banks are more further ahead than the community banks on that stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I know as us, a small community bank, we have some things that are not as advanced as maybe your online banks only. Like they don't even have a brick or mortar. So they have to be more technologically advanced. But you're right. There's going to be expenses on the bank side for any kind of technological upgrade.
Yeah.
Okay. So in a customer service world, how do you measure excellence? Like, how do you measure success? Is it just based on your RSSA's performance, or is there some other metric that you use?
I think success can be measured in many ways. And as their trainer, I reach out to the new hires to ask them how they're doing. Are they getting comfortable in the new RSSA position? I also assign, or the manager would assign, a mentor to work with them. So as they are getting into the branch on their first couple of weeks, their mentor works with them very closely, kind of a checklist type of thing. Did we do this or that? Where do we need more work on? And we also have a position in the back office of retail who is kind of known as the mentor. So he is working with them and reaching out to them throughout their onboarding process into the bank.
Okay. How long does an RSSA train before they're kind of put on the floor and set to the, set out on their own.
Off you go.
And how we do is that comparable to, other banks do the same thing?
I think I'm going to answer this later too.
Okay.
However, so our first initial training is 2 weeks.
Okay.
In person. So that's before they get into the branch in person with customers. But at that point, they're just transactional. They're the old style of teller.
Okay.
6 months later, then they come back for 4 more days and they do new accounts training, learning how to open up all the different types of accounts. And 3 months after that, so 9 months in, they get their loan training.
Okay.
So,
is that to kind of prevent fatigue or being
overload?
Yeah.
it's overload, I
Yeah.
believe. So I always tell people in my first 2 weeks, I'm teaching you what you need to know in order to get ready to do the basic transactions.
Okay.
But there's so much more that they need to know.
Sure.
The one thing about the RSSAs is they have to know a little bit of everything and a little bit about all of our products. And so allowing them to just start off, let's just start transactionally. Let's balance the drawer every day, that type of stuff. And then 6 months in, now I can suggest products. Now I can profile somebody and open up accounts for them and find out what they actually need.
So you kind of need that transactional part of it to sort of become autopilot.
Yeah, it takes some time. I mean, I have tellers at busier branches that are more advanced too, and at the slower branches, it takes them a little bit longer just because they're not seeing as much every day. The more you do, the more you're going to know it.
Yeah. I mean, I was a teller for a hot minute at another bank, and I mean, literally less than a year, but I was shocked at how much I had to learn as a teller because up until that point, I mean, I was pretty young. Most of my banking experience was literally walking into the branch and saying, I want to deposit my paycheck. I want to take $60 out. I want to move money from my checking to my savings. Like it was like the simplest stuff. And so in my head, that's what a teller did. And then I became a teller and it was like, whoa, like I can't believe how much
You
stuff
can do
you have
that?
to. Yeah, I mean, at the time it was stuff like even just weird stuff like traveler's checks you had to sell. And then you were redeeming bonds and you were doing all of this kind of stuff that I had never done because at my level of banking at the time, I just wasn't equipped to do, But every teller has to learn how to do that and to do it. I think it's got to be kind of like driving a car. When you first start to drive the car, you're thinking about every little thing. You're thinking, okay, I got to put it in drive. I got to put the hands on the wheel. Got to hit the brake, the gas, and whatever. And you're worried about how much pressure you put on everything and where you're looking. But eventually it kind of becomes autopilot. Then you can hold a conversation and rock out to the radio and you're still driving safely. So it's kind of the same thing with the tellers, right? You got to learn the operational side and then you can start having conversations.
Absolutely. It's funny. What you just said is very much what the conversation I have with a lot of our new people. Like, oh my gosh, I thought I was just taking in deposits, cashing checks, things like that. But the more technology advances, the more fraud that happens, the more of all of these different things, the more we have to know as tellers. So training from when I trained 5 years ago is even more advanced now. So
yeah. So how you said about fraud, that kind of leads me to the next question. So how do you train your staff to handle difficult situations? Because I can almost guarantee there are times when fraud becomes a conversation you have to have with customers, but I'm sure there's other things too.
There's a lot of times many different difficult situations that we can run into. So we train our staff.
Name 5, Amy.
Oh, I definitely could. We train our staff to remain calm, try not to argue with our customers, try to explain things in simple terms. Our basic customers don't know everything that we know. They're not aware of what's going on out there with scams. So with fraud, a lot of times it's just listening to the customer, hearing their story, assuring them that we're here to help them, letting them know that they're not alone because they feel stupid. How did I fall for that? But it's happening so much that it's part of our everyday life here in banking. So almost every branch every day is reporting some kind of fraud. And that a lot of times is handling a difficult situation. Customers are upset. Customers feel stupid. So how can you calmly and, efficiently tell them like, hey, we're here to help. Don't worry. I'm not getting worked up over it because I know how to help you.
Yeah.
It sounds like it can be very intense working as an RSSA. How do you keep your employees motivated? Do you incentivize or I mean, what's the best way to do that?
Pizza parties.
Pizza parties.
Yeah, pizza parties, bucket parties. So motivation, honestly, I think a lot of times comes from within, from just good people working on our front lines. However, we do some things, to keep our branch staff motivated and excited. So we do meet monthly. This is where the staff can come to our headquarters here in Johnstown, and other departments are presenting about updates and different practices that are going on. So some of these things are promotions, and I know Drew comes and presents at our platform meetings sometimes about Elon promotions.
Yeah.
So sometimes the RSSAs can be motivated by a particular promotion, and a lot of times it's just about having a good speaker to motivate them, But ideally, I think we just find employees who genuinely care about their customers. On top of coming to work to make a paycheck, do you come to work to make a difference in someone's life?
And that goes back to what you look for in a good
exactly.
RSSA.
Exactly.
Yeah, you could put that on a poster. I mean, do you come to work for a paycheck or do you come to work to make a difference? I mean, no, seriously though. I mean, I think that's, again, going back to what I said before about customer service being something that's cross-industry.
It is.
I think that the best people for customer service are the people that truly care about what happens to the customer that's standing in front of them. And it's not just the next transaction.
It's not just numbers in a book. It's people. And that's part of being a frontline person. You're actually seeing these people face to face, whereas a lot of our back offices, we are crunching numbers sometimes. So I think it makes things more real. It makes numbers come to life, that checking account belongs to somebody. And that was a real life experience for somebody. And how do I help them?
Yeah. And I would have to think too, you're dealing with a pretty wide variety of customers, I would imagine. It has to be easy for some people to start thinking, well, there was only a $60 whatever or a $5 fee. But for some people, a $5 fee makes all the difference, right? So you can't always just assume that a customer service example, for somebody that has, $25,000 in their account, and they get a $5 fee, they don't care.
Those are the ones that do care.
Well, okay. Yeah, I can imagine that's probably true too.
Yeah.
But
well, that kind of leads into the next question with, dealing with motivation. So, if you have an RSSA that maybe not as motivated and is not performing well, how do you deal with an employee that maybe is not putting forth the effort they need to?
So my goal is to help each RSSA understand and perform their job successfully. So if a teller is struggling out at the branch, one thing that I've been doing is bringing them back to downtown for retraining. We kind of refresh their memory on some things, revisit some things that maybe they've struggled with or made mistakes on. So one-on-one training has been very successful for me. And I've also visited the branches. Let me just go there and stand with you as you talk to the customers and do your transactions.
I think that makes sense. So I guess that kind of leads right into the next thing that you have on here, which is, you have any examples? Give us the dirt, is what I'm saying. Tell us.
So I think the question, is like...
And it doesn't even have to do with banking. You said you are a businesswoman. You have a side business too. If you have an example that maybe does not pertain to a bank, but it's still customer service related.
So I have a really good banking experience.
Okay. All right. Spill it.
Okay. So when I was working at University Heights, it was the busiest branch I've ever been to, and it is our busiest branch. But I had a customer, he was an elderly gentleman. He kept coming in every day withdrawing $5,000. So this was like several days in a row, and he kept coming to my window. And so I asked him, "Are you okay? And what happened to your money yesterday?" And not in a, prying way, but kind of just worried about him.
Yeah, you had $5,000 yesterday. You go to the casino?
Yeah, I know. What maybe he's forgetting. Maybe he's placing it in his closet and doesn't remember he came here yesterday and did this. So he said that someone took his money and that downtown was not safe. So we began to get worried about him, asking him more questions. He seemed kind of confused. We watched him go out to his car, get confused on what side of the car to get in on. So because of all of these things, we have something in place where we call the area on aging. Voice our concerns. What did we see? That type of thing. After a lot of research with this gentleman and visits with the area on aging, they did find that he was sadly losing his mind a little bit, going dementia or some other sort of disease, and they did end up removing his driver's license. It's so hard, though, to have that conversation with that customer and say, I'm sorry, like, what's going on? Are you okay? Why are you taking this money? And that goes back to our fraud conversation from earlier. So a lot of times people don't want to believe that they're being scammed, and they will try to hide from our tellers or our bankers why they're doing this transaction or what they're doing, because the scammer is telling them, just be general, just go take out this money and don't tell them why.
Because I've done this before. They know how to play the system.
Right, exactly. So a lot of these kinds of, either whether it's like my situation with an older customer who kind of just needed someone there to help him, or it's that, elderly person being taken for a scam, you have to find a way to resolve it. And unfortunately, we do have, help in the back offices where we can call retail and say, okay, what do I do with this guy? What's the next step on this situation? And we do have a good team that will always jump in and help you guys.
Yeah, I think that from a fraud perspective, you said a lot of customers don't always want to admit that they're being taken, for fraud. And I think that has to be embarrassing too, especially if you've already been taken. Like, okay, if that gentleman had been sending that $5,000 to someone, right? Once you sort of have that momentum, like, well, I've already done this and I'm already halfway in, and now I feel embarrassed backing out. And how do I tell this person I'm going to back out? Because I think a lot of people still have this impression that the scammer is someone that they don't want to make upset, because these scams sometimes depend on sort of getting your buy-in, getting your sympathy, playing on your emotions. And so you don't want to upset this person, even though they're obviously taking advantage of you,
Right.
That's got to be hard, so I mean, I guess fraud sort of leads into this, the next question, which was, staying updated on emerging sort of customer service trends, incorporate them into team practices. I mean, I think that if you were training someone on good customer service 10 years ago, it's probably different than what you were training today. Is that fair?
To a certain extent, although a lot of the nuts and bolts are the same, I'll say that. We always want to talk about our products, or what are the features, what are the benefits, things like that. But I think it comes down to, what is your demographic? We have so many different demographics of people dealing with different stages of their lives, and doing research. What does that demographic need? Maybe we attend some different webinars and things like that to stay up to date on what are different banks doing, and maybe the bigger banks like we talked about earlier that are more advanced in technology because they are so large. What are they doing? And then, how do we make that work in our community setting?
Do you have any unique training initiatives or programs that you give to your RSSAs?
So earlier you asked me about like the timeline of training, and I think that this comes into play. So I've trained several different employees that have come from other banks, and they have affirmed me that our training program is unique in and of itself, just being in person. So
Really?
a lot of banks are doing either virtual training or kind of on the fly training live in person with real life customers, real money.
That's scary.
A little bit scary, yeah. So just the fact that we bring them here with play money, as silly as it may seem, that 2 weeks of not having the pressure of the live customer, the live money, is unique in and of itself. So it's 2 weeks long. That's longer than what they were getting at other banks. Then we give them time to get acclimated before we make them do more things like sell products and new accounts. And then we give them even more time before they have to learn how our whole loan program works. So I think the uniqueness of AmeriServ is just how much time we give our tellers to learn, as well as it being in person and kind of in a training. I don't know.
Do you see that makes a difference in the number of mistakes tellers make just by the length of time that they are in training?
I would like to think so.
Okay.
I don't really have anything to compare that to. Yeah. But I would like to think that the more I see them one-on-one or in person, the less issues we're having out there in the branches.
I have to think from a customer perspective too, that has to be more reassuring, because if I'm a customer and I walk into my bank and I walk up to the teller window and they're like, "Hi, how are you?" And there's this sort of deer in the headlights and there's somebody standing behind them saying like, "Got to log in." It makes me go, can I really give my money to you?
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
so I think having a good training program and building that confidence in your tellers before they get in front of a customer,
Mhm.
that in and of itself is probably a better customer service experience.
I would like to think so.
what I
Absolutely.
mean?
I agree
Yeah.
with you. Yeah.
Well, then you had mentioned about the customers feeling a little more comfortable with a more trained RSSA. How do you gather feedback from customers on the performance of your tellers?
So one of the things that we've been doing at the branches is customer appreciation days. And during these customer appreciation days, they've collected surveys, kind of a little bit about the customer, but also about the branch and how we're doing. So that was one way that I thought was unique and kind of a welcoming experience, with little prizes or treats for our customers. And then I try to reach out to the branches on trainings. How was the training? What other things are you looking to get training on? So I want to give them what they need and what they want. So if they can give me feedback on what they're lacking, then I can kind of tailor my trainings to their needs.
Okay.
Yeah. So just to kind of go back, because I've been thinking about it, just to go back a little bit on what we were talking about, like this, sort of online versus in person.
Mhm.
So what are you doing, if anything, to sort of create a more seamless transition for people who sort of bounce back and forth between the two? Like that sort of like omni-channel experience where some people use online, like you said, like Jeff said, like you use online and you're in person.
Right.
You're sort of middle of the road, halfway between the two worlds.
Right.
So what do you think banks could do better? What do you do with your training that sort of encourages
And I'll add to that too.
Okay.
Is it a big deal to kind of untrain an RSSA from a previous bank versus AmeriServ? Is it more difficult to train someone who has previously been working at a different bank?
Okay, let me answer that one first.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll do that first.
Okay. Sorry.
So I find that sometimes, depending on the teller or the person, they do have to unlearn some things that they've learned at their other bank. We have different policies, different procedures. However, I do feel that it always helps them in general if they came from another bank.
Okay.
I don't have to start from scratch explaining what different regulations are,
Okay.
right?
Fair enough. Yeah.
If it's slightly different here at AmeriServ, at least they know what that regulation means. So it does cut down a lot of the little extra stuff I have to talk about if I have a trainee from another bank. Whereas if I have someone off the street like I came in knowing nothing about banking and had to learn everything from beginning to end. So it's a lot more involved, a lot more explaining to do with a brand new person. And then Drew's question, how do we create that like seamless channel for our customers who are a little bit technology and a little bit, in person?
You're a little bit, country. I'm a little bit rock and roll,
Like the song. Yeah. So I think that one thing AmeriServ did, and, I started here in 2019 and we did not have this RSSA position. So one thing that we did as a bank was create that universal teller position. So whether you are someone who likes online banking and you just need to come in and say, hey, my app's not working, or you're that person who once talked through everything and every transaction, we have that teller that can do it all. So that was one thing that the bank did as a positive change, I believe, making that universal teller. But I train all the RSSA staff on making the customer the center focus of the transactions and not so much selling a product, but giving them what they need.
What's your perspective on the importance of going the extra mile? And can you give an example of a time when an RSSA may have given the extra mile and pleased the customer, more than needed? Yeah.
So going the extra mile, I think, means the little things. It's giving the customer a call after they opened up a new account or after they had fraud, following up with someone that had questions, or helping the elderly with their technology or their online banking, things like that. Even acknowledging the kids with a sticker or the dogs with a dog treat, the customers remember.
That's a big deal. Yeah.
So those little things, I think, are the extra mile, even though they're so tiny. Like those are the things that
But people
we
notice it,
remember.
yeah.
Yeah. And remembering the customer's name, even, that just goes a long way. So I have so many examples of good things that I've seen our tellers do out there. But, following up after a fraudulent situation, I keep going back to fraud, but I do feel like that's a big thing right now. And if someone's dealing with that and worried about what's coming in and out of their account, making that phone call the day after you met with them to say, hey, I just wanted to let you know I checked up on your account. Everything looks fine. I see your AT&T bill coming through. Is that okay? Etc. That really just means a lot to that customer. And I've actually had a teller tell me, hey, like, not that I expected it, but she brought me in chocolates after that. Like, just to, like, it makes us realize that, hey, we did something good for that person. And it gives us satisfaction in our job knowing that we helped them.
I mean, I think that makes a big deal and even statistics, I've read that something on the lines of 75 or 80% of people now sort of expect a quote unquote personalized experience with their banking. And I think that personalized experience comes from exactly what you're saying, knowing that, hey, this person typically doesn't shop at that place, or this person's having trouble with their online banking. Instead of me just shutting it down and assuming it's fraud, like maybe I should pick up the phone and call them or do something like that. I think that's the kind of thing that when they say personalized banking, I think community banks do a better job of that than a lot of your bigger banks.
That's a little bit of what makes us a community bank, the fact that we do know our customers, we recognize them in person, we know their names of their dogs.
Yeah.
So I think that's part of the community bank aspect of it as well.
Yeah. So I forget, how long have you been in banking?
5 years.
So you went from knowing almost nothing about banking to being the trainer in 5 years. That's impressive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've actually bounced around this bank a lot. I started as a part-time teller in Northern Cambria, went to Carrolltown because I could walk to work, and that was a perk.
Yeah.
And then I went to the loan department, learned a little bit about consumer loans and the back end of those. And then I was like, what does retirement services do?
Yeah.
I went over there and I learned about 401ks and IRAs and things like that. And what I really missed after being in back offices for like a year and a half was the customer service part of the job. And I went back to being a teller, and I went to the busiest branch, and I learned as much as I could and jumped into every situation I could to help out. And through learning all of that, I knew that I'm a teacher at heart. Teaching and being in this training position was my goal all along, but I do feel like jumping around actually helped me a lot. I learned more because I was curious and wanting to know more.
Yeah.
Sure.
Wow.
So see, there's hope for both of us yet.
You train me?
Yeah, come on up. I'll train you next time. We have a class next week.
I think we should do like job shadowing a little bit.
Part of your podcast.
Yeah. I mean, I think that should be a requirement that once a year you go to a different department for a day and you learn what they do.
Well, did you guys cross-train in maybe preparation for a strike or something like that?
Well,
I'm sorry.
I mean, way back in the day, we did a little bit, but I got more cross-training again, I said I was a teller for less than a year at a different bank. But when I was at that bank, that was one of the things that we did. Part of the training process was you had to spend, like 1 week of the training was spending a half a day with like 5 or 6 different departments. So on Monday, you spent the morning with transaction services, and the afternoon you spent with lending. Then Tuesday, you spent the morning with somebody else. But the idea was to try to get at least a taste of what that other department is going through, because at the time, a lot of the stuff we were doing was still on paper. So we would send, deposit tickets, we would send credit ticket, and all the credits and debits had to be in the right order. And
that's still the case.
Yeah.
You're at AmeriServ.
But the thing of it is, like, a lot of tellers would be like, well, what does it matter as long as they're both there? But then you go down to where they're processing that work, and you understand that if they're not in the right order, it slows them down just exponentially. And just understanding what they're going through from their perspective was a big help in understanding what to do upstairs, And that's a customer service thing, to be quite honest, because, when you're processing that work, that customer's going home and they're looking at their online banking and they're saying, why isn't my deposit showing up yet? Well, because there's somebody physically doing that work in the behind the scenes, keying that stuff into a system, in a lot of banks still.
Yeah. Well, that's actually part of our training program too. During the first 2 weeks, we take them to the department called Transaction Services, and they learn how to scan their work, which then Transaction Services looks at. So they get to see the back end of that. So when they're at the branch getting a call saying, hey, you have a rescan, they're not getting upset because that person in the back office, they're now,
They understand.
they can appreciate what they're doing. And we're all kind of here for the same reason and the same goal, but it's nice to see what other departments do to make things all come together.
Sure.
Yeah. Thank you, Amy. This has been very informative, to be honest. I mean, it's really awesome. And I don't think a lot of people think of the customer service aspect of banking.
No.
You know, they think they're going to the bank and that person's just born with all the knowledge that they need to take their check and put it into the system. But it's not that way. It's
Right.
way more complicated than you might think.
Yep.
And all of the back end staff that support those frontline
Absolutely.
employees. Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you for being that person that teaches everybody how not to lose my money. So what little of it I have.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Amy.
All right.
This podcast focuses on having valuable conversations on various topics related to banking and financial health. The podcast is grounded in having open conversations with professionals and experts, with the goal of helping to take some of the mystery out of financial and related topics, as learning about financial products and services can help you make more informed financial decisions. Please keep in mind that the information contained within this podcast and any resources available for download from our website or other resources relating to bank chats is not intended and should not be understood or interpreted to be financial advice. The host, guests, and production staff of Bank Chats expressly recommend that you seek advice from a trusted financial professional before making financial decisions. The host of Bank Chats is not an attorney, accountant, or financial advisor, and the program is simply intended as one source of information. The podcast is not a substitute for a financial professional who is aware of the facts and circumstances of your individual situation. When it comes to customer service, most companies will tell you that theirs is excellent. But are companies really taking the time to encourage outstanding service? And how important is it really? Well, studies show that 73% of customers say that after just one poor experience dealing with an employee in your company, they would rather do business with a competitor. Considering how difficult it is for most businesses to bring in new customers compared to the relative ease in cultivating existing relationships, making customer service education a priority should be high on the list of any successful business. Our thanks to Amie Stevens for joining us on the program today. And as always, I want to recognize Jeff McTavish as co-host and producer of the show. If you're not subscribed already, please consider tapping that button so you never miss an episode. AmeriServ Presents Bank Chats is produced and distributed by AmeriServ Financial Incorporated. Music by Rattlesnake Milo and Andrew Kalitkin. For now, I'm Drew Thomas. So long.